as they head out on track. The sound of the return to power. 1966 to 1985 Cosworth era Formula One cars on the Grand Prix circuit at Silverstone. Cars heading out. They qualified yesterday in warm, sunny and dry conditions. Today is anything but it's Matthew Wrigley's Tyrrell 011 on pole from Stuart Hall in the Ram March. Then Steve Hartley's McLaren MP41 and Werner Dansenborg in his ex-Ricardo Patrese Brabham BT49 in fourth. Mike Cantillon's Williams FW07C, the last and most successful of those, ahead of Jamie Constable's Tyrrell. Then Simon Fish in the Arrows A4, Christoph Dansenborg and Lucas Halusa in Williams's is Mark Harrison's Shadow ahead of Steve Brooks's Lotus 91. That's the first of the JPS coloured cars. And then Mark Hickson behind him. Warren Briggs in the M29 McLaren, the last type that James Hunt drove for the team. Michael Fitzgerald's Arrows A4 ahead of the similar car of Patrick Dorbury and the unique Lek of Peter Williams. Tyrrell 012 from Ian Simmons and then the Surtees behind him. And then a couple more Williamses and Tyrrells before you get to Ewan Surgison's ex-Clay Regazzoni Shadow. And the race will be rounded out by a pair of Shadows and the McLaren M19 of Roel Goethe. Two cars from early in this Cosworth era. Well, in our memories, British Grand Prix were always hot and sunny. 1983 was an absolute scorcher. Not all of them were though. Some of them were cold, wet and miserable, but not many of them had this many Cosworth engine cars in the field. 29 of them, and from a variety of different eras. You can see the early to mid 80s cars looking much more modern than the high airbox yellow and blue Matchbox Surtees, and cars like the red and white Clay Regazzoni Shadow as well, the UOP Shadow a little further back, the high airbox of the late 70s, replaced by a much more aerodynamic look to the car. So the blue Candy Tyrrell leading the field, that's Matthew Wrigley, Stuart Hall in the Ram March behind him. Then Steve Hartley's McLaren and the white and blue Parmalat Brabham of Werner Dansenborg. Lots of familiar liveries, JPS Lotuses, Marlboro McLarens, and a whole host. I think the Tyrrells predominantly have more different sponsor liveries. You've got the Candy Tyrrells, you've got the Benetton Tyrrells, you've got the denim Tyrrell that Jamie Constable driving, and in fact I think most of the Tyrrells in the race at some stage were driven by Michele Alboreto. He spent a number of successful years at Tyrrell. So the safety car starts us and the race is underway. This is a racing lap. So trying to find where the grip is, where the puddles are, and our pole sitter Matthew Wrigley in car number 72, the Candy Tyrrell, looking to find where the grip is and try and build some heat in the tyres. So that Tyrrell 011 ahead of Stuart Hall's ex-Raul Boesel Rothman's Ram March, a team run by John McDonald. The last March chassis to race in Formula One, although they were named as Rams.
Designed by Adrian Newey, that. Oh dear, what did I say? Adrian Newey. Designed by my brain's gone.
Yeah.
I'm overtaken by Formula One cars.
Mike Cantillon's engine appears to have gone as well. So this is not great news. The Williams FW07C, that was the best qualified of the fleet of Williamses.
Adrian Reynard.
There you go.
Sorry, Adrian overtook me and went Newey.
Yeah, well, at least you didn't get Flux.
True.
No disrespect, Fluxy, but I'm not sure he's entirely ever a designer. Yeah, Mike Cantillon's car. And one of the problems with non-electronic ignition is water. And it looks like Mike's FW07C is failing to proceed. Now, whether the marshals are going to be able to get enough speed up for him to drop the clutch and get it to fire, or whether he's not even going to try, I'm not sure. Well, they had a lunch break, already into pushing action. Well done, gentlemen, thank you very much. Post on the radio will radio through when the car is safely out of the way. That's a real shame for Mike and for the fans, because who doesn't want to see yet another Cosworth era car blatting at full speed around the Silverstone circuit. You can see how much water the cars are throwing up, even at very moderate pace for an F1 car behind the RML built SWB. The wail of the Cosworth, such a distinctive engine noise, isn't it? You can absolutely recognise it anywhere.
Yes, it did go through a serious amount of development over the years, up until the Tyrrell 011, which was the last car to win a race with the DFE, the Tyrrell 012, the last car to run in a Grand Prix with a DFE, but all those years it still sounded pretty much the same. And I think that was Matt Wrigley saying, let's get on with it, wasn't it?
I think so. I think that they're not going to build any temperature in the tyres at this speed, and so this is not actually helping the driver. Safety car has pulled in. We are getting ready to go green. The race is underway. Coming through Club Corner, the field is led by Mike Wrigley, being chased by Stuart Hall in the Ram March. We already have 2 laps behind the safety car in the book. Matt Ridley, the pole sitter under pressure from former Endurance World Champion Stuart Hall. Stu spent a lot of time racing with Raul Goetter's Rofco team, and he lunges down the inside as they get onto the brakes into Village, and it is through into the lead for the Rambarch. Not the most successful of cars in period. It was always a handsome device, and near quarter of a century of development is making that car a whole lot more fun to drive clearly. Stuart Hall leads, Steve Hartley in 3rd place in the McLaren MP4-1, and then in 4th place is I think still the Brabham BT49 of Werner Dunsenborg, but he is in the mist. In fact, it's Jamie Constable in 99, the green Tyrrell, who's moved up to 4th, Werner Dunsenborg down to 6th, because that is Simon Fish's Arrows A4 up into 5th spot, so he's made a good start as well. Werner Dunsenborg being a little cautious in the Brabham.
And the car's coming through Woodcote Corner, and they're going to cross the timing line for the original start when these cars were current between Woodcote and Copse as they come down into Copse Corner. Beautiful shot there of Stuart Hall turning in, then Matt Wrigley in 2nd place, the 3rd placed car of Steve Hartley, the MP41 McLaren, and then we had Jamie Constable in 4th place as they make their way through Maggots into Beckett's for the first time on a racing lap, and turn through the right-hander. And Jamie Constable looks to be fairly comfortable in that position there. I wonder whether he'll make a challenge to Steve Hartley down the Hanger Straight and into Stowe Corner, which always was and remains an excellent overtaking position.
The first 2 of the Williams is through. Christoph Danzenborg, car number 37, and Mark Harrison, number 93, has dropped a little further back. So Lucas Hamusa in his FW08, the car with the very much blunter nose than the 07C, should be the next Williams through. That's the way it looked as they came through the Beckett's S's. And it is very, very grim. The black shadow, it is a black shadow of Mark Harrison, is in 9th place. And then the next of the McLarens, that's car number 8. And that's a good move up from 13th on the grid from Mark Higson. Now, Stuart Hall, as an ex-professional racing driver, he raced top flight single-seaters, raced for factory teams at Le Mans, and in endurance racing, he is, in terms of driving heritage, probably the class of the field, so it's no surprise to see him up the front and starting to stretch his legs a little bit away from Matt Wrigley. But in these conditions, it is the wet weather experience of the driver that's going to be the limiting or levelling factor. Number 12, Lotus, just having a little lunge down the inside. That's Steve Brooks in the first of the JPS cars. It's going to be interesting to see the progress or otherwise of Nick Padmore in car number 1. That's the other black and gold JPS Lotus. That's the twin chassis Lotus 88 that Ed was talking about in the collecting area. It's a very much an unknown quantity, was never raced in period, has not been raced much since, and with the team and with Nick Padmore, it's very unknown indeed. They did few laps in qualifying, so we'll see how he goes. He's got the ability, but whether he's worked out how the car is going to go in the wet or not remains to be seen.
He was up 7 places on the first lap, so Nick Padmore certainly the lower reaches of the top 20 has made his way through quite comfortably. It remains to be seen whether he can make much more progress. It gets harder as you go further and further up the field. But Jamie Constable is starting to come under a little pressure now from Simon Fish as they go through Beckett's and Werner Dansenberg in the very, very pretty BT49 Brabham, and then a couple of Williams following them up, and then the 77 Steve Hartley car just behind.
Yeah, there's the two Williamses. Christoph Dansenberg in 37, the 07C, and sweeping around the outside, the FW08, the car's replacement, Lucas Halusa in the red and white helmet. Dansenberg having a long, hard look over his left shoulder, because what neither of them want is to interlock wheels, and he couldn't see in undoubtedly rain-covered mirrors exactly where Lucas Halusa had gone to, and that's the sort of respect that you will see between these drivers, not just because of the car's value, but because of their own value. And you know, these guys will race against each other week in, week out, month in, month out, and they trust and have to trust each other at the sort of speeds they're doing, particularly when the weather is bad and the grip is low.
And Steve Hartley behind them, mentioned that just a second ago, but that actually means he's dropped back a few places because he was running in third in the McLaren. So Steve Hartley must have had a half spin, I think, somewhere out of our sight, and he dropped behind the two Williams.
It might be just that he's being a little cautious and may not have quite the heat he wants. There's 99, Jamie Constable in the green denim liveried Tyrrell. When you think of denim, you think of blue and a cellar, but it's a different denim. And Simon Fish behind in the orange A4, and then comes the Brabham, and Werner Dansenberg now starting to get on top of the car. And I know Christian Danner never drove for Arrows and never had an orange helmet, but if he had, that's what he would have looked like. Simon Fish is a very tall driver. He's a long way out of the cockpit. Look at Jamie Constable coming towards us. He was relatively tall, but Simon Fish, there's a lot more of him sticking out of the car than you would necessarily often see. But right behind him, Werner Dansenberg in that blue and white Parmalat Brabham, the BT49, the same car with which Nelson Piquet won his first World Championship. The same mark of car.
And Dansenberg, you mentioned at the very start, fairly gentle in the first few corners, but he seems to now have got really to grips with that BT49 Brabham and closing in. In fact, he's pulling into the inside. That's mainly to get out of the spray, but it might offer an opportunity into Stowe Corner, but no, he decides to stay behind. Simon Fish remains in fourth place, Werner Dansenberg in fifth place as they go through Stowe Corner.
Yeah, I'm not sure pulling over actually helped him, because it looked like Jamie Constable's Tyrrell was throwing up the spray on that line. He pulled out of what was maybe a cleaner view for Simon Fish. Werner Dansenberg there. Matt Wrigley had just set the fastest race lap at 2 minutes 14.2. Stuart Hall has trumped that, 2 minutes 14.0, so continues to lead by nearly 2 seconds. But their lap times are coming down now. The drivers are definitely getting a feel for this. There was a thought of throwing a yellow flag there at the marshal's post, but it looks as though somebody who had run off wild, maybe Hall or Wrigley, had run off a little wide, and no dramas. Nick Padmore is in the pit lane, and that's a disappointing end to his race, I'm afraid, in the Lotus 88, car number 1. So we're not seeing it here, but he's gone into the pits. And as I said, the car was not raced in period, so you don't get copious setup notes from Lotus. You get a blank A4 sheet that says we were disqualified, Gov. Meanwhile, Tyrrell versus Surtees. Now, this is not a battle that you would have seen in period. John Surtees' team was very much a Formula One force in the 70s, but the Tyrrells, of course, they raced in the 70s, but this particular Tyrrell is very much a 1980s car. So that is the battle for, where is this? Just outside the top 10. top 20 in fact. Number 19, that's the Surtees dropping down to 23rd place.
And a good run for Vernon Dartenberg, and he's pulled to the right into the spray. Can't see what's going on. No, he didn't manage to get through on the run from Copse up to Beckett's. Difficult place to overtake there, but he is reasonably close behind Simon Fish, so he may have another go down the Hanger Straight into Stowe Corner as they come through Chapel out onto the long Hanger Straight. And just ahead of them, Jamie Constable, as we see Nick Padmore in the twin chassis Lotus 88, unfortunately being pushed down the pit lane. Yep. Obviously a mechanical problem for them in that car.
Yeah, it looks like it might be an ignition problem because he's a dead stick, isn't he? He's got no motor. I think that was Mike, the team boss, desperately waving for some of the boys to come and help him. Well, there's Simon Fish in the orange and white arrows. And, now there you go. There's Roll Girter behind in the Yardley liveried car. And Roll down in 25th place, loops it backwards. But no dramas there. So Yardley liveried McLaren of Roll Girter goes for a little trip backwards.
That was known in period as the alligator car because of its sort of wide fuel tanks either side of the driver, the radiator in the nose, which of course after that era they changed to the radiators on the side pods.
And again you see the shadow coming towards it is shadows coming towards us, kind of a 58U in Surgison's Shadow DN9A, that a front radiator car as well, whereas the arrows behind, again, exactly as you say, with the radiators in the side pods. And of course, side pods became much larger in the very late 70s, early 80s, because that's where the ground effect was controlled, and the longer the tunnel under the side pods was, the more ground effect you could generate. Some of these cars would have been full ground effect cars in period. You see Stuart Hall with a lot of understeer as he turns into the Beckett's S's. Somebody shot off just in front. Who are they going to catch as they come out the Chapel curve? And again, the car understeering a lot in the end of the S's. And there was a back marker, and it was Roll Girter, so his boss, if you like, and the car's owner. Stuart Hall puts a lap on Roll Girter. Stuart Rolled and Jamie Campbell-Walter, World Endurance Championships in GT a few seasons ago. And Stuart's relationship with Rolled has continued since that. In fact, it's now well over a decade long that he's been racing with and coaching Roll Girter, and now Rolled's two boys as well who also race, and they're coming up behind the Surtees, the yellow and blue Matchbox Surtees. And again, you know, that's a car from the mid-70s, racing against cars from the zenith of the Cosworth era in the early to mid-80s. And that decade of chassis development, never mind aerodynamic development, making such a difference. But this battle for the lead, Matt Ridley in the blue Candy Tyrrell car number 72, all over the back of Stuart Hall in number 18, the Ram March.
Certainly Matt Wrigley has closed up, hasn't he? He set the fastest lap of the race last time around, I think. Yes, it was last time around. So he has improved his time and closed in to within a second of Stuart Hall, as we see the number 27 Williams being pushed in. Another, I'm afraid, probably due to the wet weather, maybe an ignition issue for Mark Hazel. That's
a real shame. You said this is such a totemic track for Williams as well, the track at which Williams scored their first ever Grand Prix, the track at which Keke Rosberg set the fastest ever qualifying lap that remains in place for decades. We're on the final lap of the race. It's now or never for Matt Wrigley. If he doesn't get a run on Stewie through the Beckett's S's and onto the Hanger Straight, it will be a race win for the Ram March and Stuart Hall. And it will require, I think, a mistake from Stuart here. He's working hard in the car. You can see, watch the front wheels as he turns in. Lots of understeer. Well, that's not mechanical, or that's not suspension understeer or geometry understeer. That's just the wheels slipping sideways as they both push these cars right to the limits. Looping spin off the road, but no damage for the arrows. And into the final corner. Oh, into Copse at least for the final time. Matt Wrigley having a lunge, but Stuart Hall comes into the Vale. Checkered flag is out. Ram March versus Tyrrell for the win. Not a phrase you would have heard in period, but the checkered flag is out and Stuart Hall wins it by inches from Matt Wrigley. 0.3 of a second the gap between them. That was a great race for those two. Jamie Constable romping away from Simon Fish to the extent that he's getting on for 2 seconds in front now. Yellow flags are out. Somebody's had a little looping spin on the exit of Club Corner. But there is the checkered flag for third place. Oh, it's because the arrows went off on the previous lap. So there we go. And everybody sweeping across the line. Behind Simon Fish in fourth, Werner Dansenburg's Brabham in fifth, Lucas Halusa in sixth position, and Steve Hartley's McLaren in seventh. Then 12th, Steve Brooks ahead of Christoph Dansenburg. So Steve Brooks in car number 12, the JPS Lotus. Beg your pardon, he's not in 12th, he's in 8th. I'm getting my cars and my numbers positions mixed up. But it was Stuart Hall who took victory. I know he'll be very happy with that indeed. These things don't come easy to anybody. They are always hard fought, as you saw there. So Christoph Dansenburg finishing 9th. And in 10th place was Mark Harrison in the Shadow DN9, the Black Shadow. 11th place was Warren Briggs in his McLaren M29. That's the front radiator car. And then that's the M26. The M29 is the slightly later car, raced in period by Jochen Mass and James Hunt in Hunt's post-championship year with the team. Not the most successful of McLarens, the M29. All of our top 13 cars are in the Patrick Head category, which is the kind of ground effect category, era cars, the latest cars. The class winner in the Fittipaldi class was car number 31, Peter Williams in the Lek, the blue car with Lek refrigeration on the side of it, or on the nose of it. And that car, again, from a very short-lived manufacturer. He won the Fittipaldi class from Carlos de Quesada in his McLaren M26, car number 5. Third in Fittipaldi was Kurt Bennett in the Shadow DN5. That's the Lucky Strike car, the black car with the high airbox. Our other class winners were in the Lauda class. I said the Lauda class. That was car number 3, Ian Simmons in the Tyrrell 012, and he finished in 20th place. And in the Stewart class, the oldest category class, is named of course after Sir Jackie Stewart, Roel Goethe, who finished in 22nd place in that Yardley McLaren, the ex-Denny Hulme car. He was the winner of that category. Well, there is the Lek with the name of its driver, David Purley. It was a team that was built around David Purley by his longtime sponsor, the owner of Lek Refrigeration. And there at the top of the picture, there's the Yardley McLaren that won in the Stewart category of Roel Goethe. So confirmation, it's Stuart Hall who wins outright in the march by a whisker from Matt Wrigley, with Jamie Constable completing the podium in the Tyrrell 011 ahead of Simon Fish by a short distance. Werner Dansenburg claiming 5th in the Brabham BT49 from the Williams of Lucas Halusa. The top McLaren was Steve Hartley, the top Lotus, Steve Brooks. Christoph Dansenburg lost a spot on the final lap in the FW07C, but at least it didn't retire, which was the fate of at least a couple of the Williamses and one of the Lotuses in a race that had a surprisingly high amount of attrition, and probably much of that down to the wet weather. 26 starters, 23 running at the finish, and 1 in the gravel. That was Michael Fitzgerald's Arrows A4.